You're sitting somewhere warm right now. Walls up, lights on, heat you didn't have to think about for even a second. Now take all of that away. The walls, the clothes, the roof, drop the temperature to -40, and leave you standing there with nothing but skin, fat, and a brain built for the African savanna. You would be dead before you finished reading this sentence twice. Now stretch that out. Make it the weather. For 7,000 years straight. That's not a horror movie. That's the Ice Age. And somehow, a soft, hairless, sun-loving species walked straight into it, and walked back out the other side. Here's the part nobody likes to admit. Evolution did not build you for this. You were designed for heat, for sweating, for shade. Mammoths had fur thick enough to laugh at a blizzard. Cave bears packed on fat reserves like it was a competitive sport. You? You got none of that? No built-in coat, no hibernation switch, just a brain, 2 hands, and an ego, apparently large enough to think that was enough. Somehow, it was. So, what do you bring to an ice fight with no claws and no fur? Fire. By the time the Ice Age hit, humans had already been using fire for 300,000 to 400,000 years. Plenty of time to stop being impressed by it and start getting creative. In Ukraine, archaeologists found fireplaces engineered to burn at over 600 degrees Celsius, hotter than most pizza ovens, in the middle of a landscape with almost no wood. Because the cold didn't just kill the animals, it killed the trees too, so people burned what was left. Animal fat, animal bone, a mammoth femur, soaked in its own marrow. Apparently burns beautifully. Waste not, want not, especially when want not, means freeze to death by morning. Fire keeps you alive standing still. It does nothing for you the second you step outside to hunt. For that, you needed a second skin. The evidence is written directly into the bones, on 300,000-year-old bear paw bones found in northern Europe. Scientists found precise cut marks, not from a fight, from a skinning knife. Early humans were taking bears' coats off, paws included, and wearing them as cloaks. Waterproof, windproof, mildly terrifying if you saw one walking toward you through the snow. But cloaks are loose, drafty, cold finds every gap. The fix took another 270,000 years to show up, in the form of a tiny carved sliver of bone with a hole through one end, the sewing needle. Around 30,000 years ago, someone figured out you could pierce hide, pull it tight, and stitch pieces together into something that actually sealed. Not a blanket with a hole in it, fitted clothing, layers, sleeves, arguably one of the most important inventions in human history, and it looks like something you'd lose down the side of a couch. Once the clothes were sorted, the accessories came next. Hunters smeared tallow, rendered animal fat, onto their faces and necks to seal the skin against windburn and frostbite. A skincare routine, tens of thousands of years before the hashtag. Then there was the glare, endless white snow under endless bright sun, and eyes that were never built for either. So northern hunters carved thin slits into bone or wood and tied them over their eyes. The world's first sunglasses. No brand name, no UV rating, just a single design goal, still be able to see by next week. Clothes solve outside. They do nothing for a sleep, for 8 hours, at -30. For that, you need a house. And in a landscape with no trees and no caves, the only building material lying around in bulk was the skeletons of dead mammoths. So that's what they used. Entire shelters built from hundreds of mammoth bones and tusks, arranged into circular frames, dug partway into the ground, and packed with hides, moss, and dirt. A house built from the leftovers of dinner. A house built from the leftovers of dinner. Efficient, slightly haunted. But the real genius wasn't the bones. It was the doorway. Builders dug the entrance lower than the sleeping area, on purpose. Cold air is heavier than warm air, so it sinks, which means the freezing air pouring in through that low entrance would just pool there, trapped, while the warm air stayed up where the people were sleeping. A cold trap, a pit built specifically to catch the cold before it could reach you. Then, on the outside, they piled snow up against the walls, which sounds like the opposite of what you'd want, except snow traps air, and air traps heat. A thick blanket of snow actually kept the inside warmer. Every remaining gap got sealed with moss, mud, and pine pitch, sticky sap that hardens like glue. The result, a structure made entirely of bone, dirt, and snow, that was somehow more energy efficient than a fair number of modern apartments. Shelter keeps you alive tonight. It does nothing for the famine in 3 weeks, once the herds have moved on and the ground is frozen solid, so food had to last. And the Ice Age, for all its problems, came with one enormous accidental perk. Free refrigeration, meat left outside simply froze. People smoked it, dried it into jerky, or just let the cold do the work. For longer storage, they dug pits straight into the frozen earth. Natural freezers built by digging a hole. And for the truly long game, there's evidence that hunters weighed down mammoth meat with rocks and sank it to the bottom of freezing ponds. An ice-cold, waterlogged, storm-proof pantry that nothing could steal and nothing could spoil. Step 1, kill a mammoth. Step 2, hide it at the bottom of a lake. Step 3, dinner 6 months later. None of that works if you can't catch enough food to begin with, so hunting wasn't a solo activity. Groups used fire and coordination to funnel entire herds of wild horses and reindeer into natural traps, taking down dozens of animals in a single brutal afternoon. One good drive, properly stored, could feed a group for months. Fire, clothes, shelter, food, on paper, that's survival sorted. Except there's one resource on this list we haven't talked about. The cheapest heater you will ever own. Other people. Every human body is a furnace, running at around 37 degrees 24 hours a day for free. So during the worst stretches, people didn't spread out. They crammed together, as many bodies as possible, into spaces that would feel suffocating to us. Personal space was a luxury, and a luxury that could get you killed. Living alone in a deep freeze wasn't independence. It was a slow-motion death sentence. And when that still wasn't enough, it gets darker. When food ran out completely, and sometimes it did for months. Some groups turned to cannibalism, not as ritual, not as a horror set piece, just as the last available calories on a planet that had run out of other options. It's the kind of detail that doesn't make the highlight reel of human history, but it happened, and pretending it didn't doesn't make those people any less our ancestors. This idea, that people are heaters, didn't end with the Ice Age either. Centuries later, in medieval Europe, peasants kept their livestock on the ground floor of the house and slept in the rooms above. The animal's body heat rose through the floor and warmed the family upstairs. A heating system made of cows, given current energy prices, someone should really bring that back. And then there are the people who didn't just change their behavior. Their bodies changed. The Yagan people, who lived at the southern tip of South America in conditions that would make most of us cry, were recorded wearing almost nothing, sometimes nothing at all, in cold that should have killed them in hours. Their secret wasn't clothing, it was their metabolism. Their bodies simply ran hotter than ours as a baseline. And when the cold got bad, they'd drop into a deep squat, knees to chest, trapping body heat against themselves like a sleeping bag made of nothing but posture, no needle required, just an internal furnace and a really good crouch. Then there's the strangest claim of all. At a site in Spain, bones from human ancestors dating back 430,000 years show cyclical growth interruptions. Stop, start, especially in the bones of teenagers. The same pattern seen in animals that hibernate, when their bodies slow everything down to ride out winter. It's controversial, most scientists aren't convinced, but the theory on the table is that some of our ancestors might have done something close to hibernation, which means somewhere back in your family tree, there might be a relative who handled winter by going to sleep for a few months and hoping for the best. Big, I deal with it in spring. Energy. None of these things look like much on their own. A bone needle, a weirdly shaped doorway, a pile of snow against a wall, but stack them together, fire, clothing, shelter, food storage, and other people. And you get something the Ice Age was never supposed to allow. A furless, tropical animal surviving the coldest stretch of weather this planet has thrown at us in the last 100,000 years. Not by growing fur, not by hibernating, mostly by noticing things. That cold air sinks, that snow insulates, that bone burns, that a sliver of bone and a strip of hide can be the difference between a blanket and a coat. Every single person you've ever met is descended from someone who made it through that. Someone who was cold and hungry and scared, in the dark, inside a shelter built from the bones of the animal they ate last week, who decided to wake up the next morning anyway. You're not here because the Ice Age was survivable. You're here because, 10,000 winters ago, somebody refused to accept that it wasn't.